Good evening and welcome to the FY18 public hearing, Finance Committee public hearing. So we're going to open the meeting to hear any comments from the public. So. Sure. Then is the public going to speak, or?
I didn't know all these VIPs were going to be here.
Well, you're fine.
I just had a couple of questions, but
In other words, you're not going to say all the crazy things you would have said if they weren't
no,
here.
I'm not going to say all those nice complimentary things about Ray and how I've loved the guy for all these years, and I don't know what I'll do without him. So I won't see him at school committee meetings. Never saw him at school committee. Stan Limpert, 43 Stonecleave Road, former member of the North Andover School Committee. Just a couple of quick questions. I know you all have talked about this, and I just haven't heard the latest. What is the latest thinking on the potential impacts on our town budget of the federal and state budgets, which are still seem to be in a pretty dramatic state of flux? Now, the federal budget doesn't have a tremendous impact on us, but it has some, and the state budget, of course, has some too. And I don't know what, if any, how those discussions went. I know you've talked about them and people have come and briefed you on that. So.
Yeah, I would say we have just been conservative as usual about the amount of state aid we've put in. Mm-hmm. We didn't do anything with federal aid. So that Title I monies, et cetera, we assumed that they would be there. Yeah. So I suppose we would make a determination, if and when we got some more information on the federal budget.
Yeah, it seems pretty more up in the air than it's probably ever been since we've been around anyway.
Right.
So it's the first time when we ever have to start to think about stuff like that. So that's one thing. The second thing is, what, if any, advantage or leverage does our new AAA bond rating that our town managers so diligently worked to get for our town, what advantage, if any, does that give us in being able to maybe give us a little more flexibility about more bonding or other ways to leverage now some of the projects we might want to be thinking about working on? Does that change our outlook on how we might want to be doing any of that?
I think fundamentally what it does is it means our cost of borrowing is lower, but we still want to maintain the sort of boundaries that we have on what we look to is debt as a percentage of revenue, and we're still trying to keep that under 5%. Right. So that would still be our goal. Would be to try to keep that number fairly low. Given that we have this sort of more advantageous situation now where we have a little bit better borrowing power, could you imagine a situation where we would want to, for a time, go beyond the 5% because we had that opportunity and we can get money a little bit more cheaply or something?
It's an operating question, John.
Right. Yeah, I would.
So my response would be that what the bond rating is doing is protecting us against general upward pressure on interest rates, which has already begun to happen. Okay. So if we're 20 to 30 basis points to the good on our interest rates as a function of a bond rating change, then that provides us the opportunity of continuing to implement the 5-year capital plan, probably a facility master plan too, by marginally getting maybe over the 5%, where in other cases, if we were going from, say, a 3% interest rate to a 5% interest rate, which the cost of debt could be that. I mean, I think the downside to the increase in the stock prices over the last 6 weeks or so in the long term means likely upward pressure on debt service costs. That's typically what the linkage is. So I would expect that as interest rates climb, our bond rating helps mitigate that, so we can hold the existing plan online, not expand the plan, but protect us from having to forego something that's already been planned because the interest costs have escalated too much.
Good answer. Yeah. So it's sort of like a protection for us in that sense. So that's good. Yeah. And the other question the other comment I guess I would have is our town government and our town manager has really done a lot to help us increase our reserves and build free cash and some other things. And this is the first, we see in this upcoming budget the opportunity to use some of that free cash for some good purposes. Do you see that kind of being a regular part of the budgeting process going forward? What do you think about the use of free cash?
I mean, I'll speak just not for as the committee writ whole, but I would say, we could be opportunistic as we are this year with the kindergarten building. I think, we do have a priority of we don't have all our reserve accounts fully funded. We're 4 out of 5 or, about that percentage. So I think our committee wants to make sure we're, completely topped off on those reserve funds. But again, would evaluate opportunities as they arise. I don't know if anybody has any additional thoughts.
It's a year-to-year evaluation. And in this case here, using it for the kindergarten was an example of being able to use it in a chunk. Now, let's see what happens over the coming years. That builds back up. So that's at least my position. I agree with Bill as well, as about making sure the reserves are maxed out. Because that's helped tremendously in our bond rating.
Well, and it's, it's certainly the kind of money that you want to use for like capital expenditures, not operating expenditures.
correct.
I mean, you don't want to use one-time money for operating expenditures,
Correct.
clearly. But it's just an interesting idea because, we haven't gotten to the point of even having the opportunity to ask these questions in town now.
Right.
So we've gotten to a point where we're really in such good shape financially and in such a stable situation that now we can have a different level of discussion about different topics, which is, interesting, I think. It gives us some new things to think about.
So I would say that, for instance, if we do a facilities master plan too, if that happens, and you have projects A through X or whatever we're going to have, and we schedule those out into the future using the current interest rate scenario and what we have in the bank, so to say, with free cash, if things get tough and the environment is not good, so that if we followed through on the schedule for those projects, that we would be, above the 5% debt ceiling or get us someplace where we're going to jeopardize our bond rating, what we would do is simply push them out further. That's one way you could handle it. Or use some free cash. Or a number of other tools, as long as we didn't upset our rowboat. That's my view of it.
So reserve funds are largely used to make sure that we continue to operate in as consistent fashion as possible. So we've jointly got ourselves on a road, right, a path, in which we all have expectations for future years. Whether it's capital projects or operating, I certainly fundamentally agree. We want a structurally balanced budget. That means no use of one-time money. That's a core fundamental principle for all our rating agency conversations. But as it relates to reserves and what they mean, to Mr. Tischart's point, we have to evaluate every year in the context of the plan. And so what the reserves allow us to do is to feel comfortable that regardless of the economic circumstance, we're going to be able to get through this facility master plan, contemplate and likely implement the second, where in some places every decision is made in the moment and promises made for the future are never fulfilled. And we have the opportunity to fulfill the promises, just like in 2012, we promised a 7-year plan, 8-year plan with 7 projects, and all you need to do is look on municipal websites throughout the Commonwealth and throughout the country, and they're all talking about facility master plans, right? We're ahead of the curve and delivered. So what the reserves allow us to do is to make sure that we're not seeing these pretty dramatic spikes in either operating costs or capital costs, that we don't go through in 07 and 08 and have to do layoffs or take other drastic steps. So that's what the reserves are for. In the moment when things are good, reserves always appear to be something almost unnecessary. Why do we have these? What are we going to do with them? But those aren't the questions you ask when you're in the middle of a economic downturn and you have the ability to tap in those reserves to make sure that you're not seeing large fluctuation in services. Correct. So it is normal to talk about reserves during good times because most folks go, hey, look at what you have. What should we be doing? What we should be doing is realizing that no 10-year period is like the preceding 10-year period, And we need to be prepared for that next sort of bubble. And I think we're prepared today, as long as we remain focused on recognizing that we shouldn't get too euphoric about where we stand today, thinking every day is going to be like today, because that's just not practical.
Well, and I think the other side of that, so to me, reserves are like insurance policies. They're fiscal insurance policies. So they're protecting us for some unforeseen circumstance when we're going to need money that we can't generate other ways.
Well, it's not quite unforeseen.
Yeah, well, I understand. But I mean, for fluctuations in
Right.
revenue, or whatever we want to say. But the other thing, too, and I think this is something that our town manager has really helped us understand, is even though times are good, it doesn't mean we need to go start throwing money around, right? I mean, we have a plan, stick to the plan, execute the plan, and then decide what you want to do next. Don't just start, reveling in the money just because we have it. So, we could have done this a couple of different ways. Not plussed up the reserves and spent the money on stuff. We could have done that, and I'm sure towns do that, but we didn't do that. So I think it's to the credit of, the people who are running the town for us that we've done the right thing, and we're going to benefit from that in the long run. So anyway, I'm done. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Any further comments from the public? Okay. Okay, any comments from the committee before a motion?
We have an opportunity to thank Stan for his services on the board,
Yes.
the school committee board. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
A motion to adjourn this public hearing.
I second.
All in favor? Aye. So, great. Okay, does anybody need a minute? Okay.
That's Stan's stuff.
Okay.
That's Stan's stuff. Have a drink of water.
All right. Okay, now. Okay, well, now we're in session. We're convening a regularly scheduled meeting of the Finance Committee. Yeah. The first item we'll handle today is we're going to vote the FY18 budget after all the presentations. So we'll do that part first, the budget and the reserve transfers. So I'm going to want these two sheets.
Typically, we get guidance from Lynn on how to vote on this.
One.
So we're going to vote each grouping. So what we'll vote is the bold number. And basically, the sheet that's in front of us contemplates us approving budgets as proposed and reviewed. So this should be pretty pro forma, unless there is any recently arrived at thoughts of doing something different, which I do not think there are. So, so why don't we, it usually works really well when we kind of set this up with a one person doing the motion, another person seconding, so then the minutes are easy to read. So,
I don't mind doing it.
okay.
So, I motion to approve the general government budget of $2,454,094.46 as documented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I motion that we approve the public safety budget of $10,909,569.54 as documented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye. I motion that we approve the education budget of $47,035,186.90 as documented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye. I motion that we approve the public works budget of $6,512,862.04.
How much?
Go back.
Oops,
6
six-
million? No, 4 million.
4-7.
Yeah.
On the next page.
Yeah, it's double-sided. Oh, I have it.
Never mind.
Okay. There you go.
Confused.
Okay,
4-7.
there you go. I'll stand corrected. A motion that we approve the Public Works budget of $4,703,411.43.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye. I was actually getting more money there, wasn't I?
just were. Quite a bit more. Nobody was saying no.
No,
I was.
quiet.
I was like, no, that ain't right.
I motion that we approve the Health and Human Services budget of $1,251,874.61 as documented.
Now you're all flustered.
All in favor?
Aye.
You have someone else who can read these motions?
Hey. I motion that we approve the Culture and Recreation budget of $1,042,157 as documented.
All in favor?
Aye. I motion that we support or approve the Support Services budget of $1,713,638.14 as documented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now you can read the 6 hours.
No, now it's the
Yeah.
debt service.
Right.
6. Yeah, right there.
Yep. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I did it this way.
Yeah.
All right.
It'll read this way.
I make a motion that we approve the debt service budget of $6,512,882.04 as documented.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
I motion that we approve the employee benefits budget of $17,424,506.58 as documented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We're on to
Liability.
liability insurance. I motion that we approve the liability insurance budget of $420,000 even.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And on the capital reserves, I make a motion that we approve the capital and reserves budget of $1,259,831 as documented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye. State assessments,
We don't vote on that. 'cause that-
okay?
The regional school.
that's- Oh, we just voted on the regional school?
You have to do the regional school.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry, I know we didn't do all of the assessments, okay. And so that's the 477,
This,
okay.
no, the 671, 250.
We don't vote on
Oh,
that.
regional Essex and.
Oh,
and-
okay.
and the regional school and Essex County Agriculture.
Okay.
The total is 671.
There's no header or title on this, so I'll be specific. I motion that we vote to approve the regional services and Essex County agricultural assessment and the school building committee, which is 0 by itself,
Yep,
the budget of $671,250.60.
yep. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Did we not do the full budget
Well,
We can't. I mean, you can vote the assessments, it's not a vote at town meeting. Town meeting doesn't vote the assessments.
Right.
You are just voting that you agree with the assessments
With the
that we're
recommendation.
putting forward for the
Okay.
recommendation.
I
So
want
you
to do
can-
that just to make it
Sure.
neat, okay.
On the state assessments of special ed, mosquito control, retired teachers, air pollution, regional transit, RMV, non-renewal, school choice, charter school assessment, and the Essex County agricultural assessment, budget of $477,667. I make a motion to approve, or make a recommendation to agree with. Is that it? Good enough.
That's fine. I second the agreement.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Bummer.
Okay,
Okay.
and then,
I
we
don't
just
think so.
do the full budget for,
Sure.
we didn't leave any stone
Yeah.
unturned?
We
Okay.
need to do the enterprise, you guys need to do the enterprise funds too,
Yeah.
which you didn't ask for, but we'll need to make sure we do those.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, we can get those. Straightened out. So go ahead and do the whole budget.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the entire general fund budget of $95,876,069 $1,000,000.80.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So then,
Sure. Let me repeat. I make a motion to approve the overall general fund budget of $95,876,069.80, which is comprised of all the other elements we just voted on.
Oh, I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, sorry.
No.
And then, on the enterprise funds, you know, I guess I should have caught it too, that we need to vote those. Would it be okay that we just vote them in
You
the
can
form of
vote 'em
warrant
based-
next week?
Oh, you can do that. Yeah, that's fine.
Just because or we can vote just the line item.
You can,
It's
you
just the
can
way
vote the
warrant
total.
language we should just talk about, because it's got transfers and, as well, that, you know, I don't want to skip over. You know, when you look at it in the warrant, you've got the, you know, 5.7 to operate it, and, you know, transfers to different funds and so forth. So I would rather do that in the.
Because that's all in the budgets in the budget book. And their
Right.
total budget is the 5.7 million, for example, for water. We typically vote that as an aggregate, as a total number,
Right.
Water and sewer isn't voted by category, it's voted as a bottom line.
as a bottom line. And the only reason we put that wording in the warrant is for the DOR purpose for
Right.
when I set the tax rate at the end of the year. Because it has to be split into
Split
different
into different
categories on the
categories. Okay.
recap. Yeah.
Okay,
So
then
we do vote it as one total number.
I'm happy to do it. So here's what we can do.
document emails, right? That we did not.
No, hang on
print?
one second. So the issue here is that the enterprise funds, which are separate from the main budget, we didn't prepare the spreadsheet for those.
Okay.
So we overlooked that, and we won't do that again. But the question is, if we want to vote them tonight, just to get the entire operating budget voted, we could do that. We should just,
It's
you know,
page
pull it out and take a look at
207,
it.
209, and 213.
I think we could do that.
Okay.
If they don't mind waiting for us to.
Not at all.
No,
The only point I'm making, if you're looking at your book, this has the old pages.
right, I gave you new, yep.
Okay.
I have these at my 207 number.
Sorry,
So there was
Yeah,
some new set of
207,
pages that came out
209.
listed.
It was
Yeah.
documented right after
Pages
page
already
206, which is where,
Yeah.
do you have them in your manila envelope? This is what they look like.
yeah, the meetings,
Yep.
that was one of the emails to us today, right?
No, that
No,
was.
those are the ones I gave you when I was at the meeting.
I don't have that.
Okay.
On the shoulder?
The same that was in the base budget.
No, it's not in the budget.
Yeah,
book.
no,
It's
they
given
got
to us
hard
separately
copies,
at another
so,
meeting.
yeah.
It might have been stuck in that
The
folder.
book itself is the same number.
Okay. All right.
So if you have the original book, it's not updated, you have the sheets. Just for discussion real quick, there is operating expenses, expenses of, 5,731,607, of which 963,705 is personnel, 1,585,876 is expenses, and then the balance, the difference there, which is the largest component of it, is single largest component, is paying for debt service and transfers to capital projects. Do you have the most current book?
No, I don't, so go ahead. It's fine. I'm comfortable with the budget presentation. I'm fine.
Yeah.
I just,
This is online, by the way, in case anyone wants to see. This is the Water
So,
Enterprise Fund.
why don't we just do this? I don't want to,
Okay, I
I'm
don't
not-
remember ever having anything inserted
So,
in this book. Maybe I missed
no.
that meeting.
let's just hang on for a second. So we have two sorts of confusion. One is mine, that I didn't ask for this to be put in a chart form that would have made it simple like the rest of the budget. So I'm apologize for that, and I'm sorry about that. Number two is that the material in the book doesn't match, you know, the actual amounts. You know, I don't think there's any risk. I think we should just push this off till next week. We'll put it in the same form that we did everything else. I don't want to cause any trouble, but I would just rather, like, I wouldn't want to be watching this and then say, do these guys know what they're talking about? Certainly, we reviewed the budget several times, and we understand all the components of the budget. But I think it would be, it would just be worth it to take, some time, get the number in front of us, and vote it when we've all had a chance to be comfortable with it. We have to do the warrant anyway, before it's printed.
This was at a meeting in 228.
Yeah.
228, you might, I can't use that.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
So,
So if anyone wants to see the refreshed,
yeah, so we'll just get that. We'll just get the water and sewer and do that.
it's online.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I'll do is, can I take that, I'll make a
Yep,
copy and I'll email it to you?
Yep,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay.
It is, they have updated.
So if anybody wants to look at the online version of the budget, all of this has been,
Right.
you just look at the online version,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
look at those pages, and you can see the details.
I use that for my part of the write-up of the warrant letters.
Yeah. So we'll
We'll create a
we'll
chart
pull down the.
tomorrow.
Yeah, we can pull down the updated pages, and I'm sorry, I was just thinking through. I was trying to make it simple.
Yeah, not a big deal.
Well, but you did, it's okay.
So,
All right. We'll take the conservative way and put it off until we get the absolute dead hit on it.
okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Now, do we have to vote on the reserve transfers? That was another sheet we got.
Yeah. So on the reserve transfers, they're in the warrant as well, but we can vote them. I think there was just one.
I wanted to make that clarification.
Right.
In the email too.
Yeah. So Lynn, we have one question. There's a transfer to the special education stabilization, but
It's
No.
supposed to be from.
it's supposed to be from. Okay.
It's a typo, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so used to putting money in.
Right.
But that transfer is,
That's
That's
a
part of the special town meeting
That's a
warrant.
special town meeting.
Right.
Or
So we'll
that-
take.
And that's what it does say.
We'll take.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The warrant language is correct.
Correct.
The-
That
Yeah.
is
Yep.
just a typo in there.
Okay.
Yes, we're moving it into school budget,
Yes.
so they can pay for the spend.
for this year.
Okay. So do we have a motion relative to the transfer from the special education stabilization?
I make a motion to to approve the transfer of reserves from the Special Education Stabilization Fund to the school budget of $200,000.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
They make a motion to transfer to OPED from the OPED Stabilization Fund a sum of $500,000.
All in favor?
I didn't second it.
Oh, sorry.
Would you like me to?
Yeah.
You should really be voting
I
for
second that.
favorable action. They're not
No,
voting
they
for
just-
transfers.
right,
It's
they
vote
don't.
for favorable.
No, we get all in favor.
Okay.
Well,
All in
they
favor?
don't vote
Aye.
for-
Okay.
They're voting favorable action over where it comes.
We expected that transfer for stabilization, but did we expect the
Right.
special ed?
Yeah.
Yes.
So just as a clarification of two things. One is, under the financial reserve policies, the finance committee has to vote whether or not to support the transfer.
Right.
That's separate in some ways from what actually happened. Doesn't make any sense. That's separate from your action on the article in the warrant. So you should, as part of a regularly scheduled finance committee meeting, discuss and support or not support
Right.
the idea of moving money. Within a warrant, the finance committee's actions are typically of voting in favorable action
Right.
or not favorable action, not necessarily voting for a transfer. You're voting favorable action. Do you support the idea? So as it relates to special education, the budget's sort of similar. But as it relates to special education, at some point, you should take action on the request. You may have received a formal request. If not, we should make sure the school department gives you a formal request. And that should be taken as part of the reserve policy, an action of whether you support that. Then it appears in the warrant.
Yes.
And in essence, under the warrant, you're voting favorable action or not. Now, it wouldn't make any sense, it wouldn't be favorable,
Yeah.
since you voted the transfer, but your action under the budget will be reflected in the warrant as favorable action on the individual items that you're voting tonight as majority for. Yeah.
Okay. All right, anything else?
Anything we can help with as part of, I know you guys, I sense from some emails that you're doing some narrative.
Yeah.
If I can assist, I'm more than happy. If there are any questions that are pending as part of your narrative development that you feel I can assist with this evening or at a later day, I'm more than happy to help in any way I can.
I think the one piece of information, if there's an updated audited statement of OPEB, because we've been going off the,
Yeah. Lynn
You sent that,
me.
okay.
I only printed
Okay.
out the summary pages, but I can forward you the
Okay.
email that Lynn sent me.
Yeah, it's actually, I
great.
think it's on the website too,
Yeah.
okay,
under budget and finance, yep.
okay.
What was the audit date?
This was the last year when we evaluated the reserves. One of the comments we had made was on OPEB.
Right.
And
so okay. So
It
we'll
was
just leave
a,
on.
you know, it was a footnote to that our current target for the OPEB stabilization fund is based on an estimated OPEB liability of 86 million and change. Big change, actually. 86,605,373.
What's a few thousand?
Yeah,
100,000?
little change. As of 6/30/2014. And then we made the comment that there was a new actuarial review estimated to come out in June 2016. I asked Lynn if we got that. We did get it. And so my question for you, Lynn, was, am I reading this correctly to say that now, under this new system in which they're evaluating OPEB liability, it's now 107,321,707.
Yes.
So I have read that correctly.
Yes, so it's
And that's fundamentally because they're accounting for it differently?
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Could you explain the difference in accounting, please?
I cannot.
So is that a result
Not
of-
in detail for you to understand. Yeah, it's the way that they're reevaluating the OPEB. I have a hard time
Yeah, we
with
can provide you
actuarials.
some language, auditing language, but in essence, the methodology for calculating the liability has changed from one valuation
Yep.
to the next. So it's not, we didn't get from them sort of a real dollar to real dollar comparison, like without the change in methodology, what the dollar value would change. This is simply largely due to a change in how they're calculating OPEB liabilities.
So they didn't provide a
They may
updated
have, but-
prior year kind of, so you can
No.
have the apples to apples?
No,
No, they don't.
no, just reevaluated based upon what they believe is the proper interpretation of GASB under the
new laws.
the new laws, and have come up with an alternative to what they believe the liability is.
They being who?
Our auditors. Well, in this case, valuation company.
Yeah.
Who did the valuation on this one?
Nyhut, the
Okay.
same
Yep.
company that's been doing it from the beginning.
So this, just like the retirement, this now is subject to regular actuarial valuation. And it's done by an independent company who goes through the process of determining the unfunded liability and creating, and doing actuarial evaluation. So we did not get a breakdown, how much it relates to mortality tables, you know, what the cost of capital may have been as a difference. We didn't get that breakdown, but as it's been described to us as a change in methodology has increased that liability
Do
by
we not get the
19 million.
breakdown yet, and we're going to?
No,
Or
it-
that's
They
just
don't
something they
typically
don't
do.
provide?
They don't provide.
They-
Nope.
Why?
And I don't,
Just because a dollar, I think, it's not that they don't provide it, it's not typically commonly asked for, it doesn't mean we shouldn't. I think in this particular case, in other words, it's not, it's a methodology change, we can get you the details of the methodology.
I think that they
I want to know the
should,
Yeah,
methodology change, even if it's
Yeah,
not written in layman's terms.
Statement just-
with you on that because
yeah.
it is a huge change, a huge difference. And you said that they have to do an actuarial. Did they not do an actuarial on the previous one?
yes, they did.
Yeah.
The methodology in terms of how they're to account for the liability has changed. Just like if a mortality table changed from one valuation to the next, the effect would be some number of dollars. In this case, how they're interpreting GASB versus how they did it 2 years earlier is resulting in a large part of the change.
Okay, so
But we'll get
it's
that
fair to
detail.
ask for that, yeah.
It's fair to ask.
Because I think it's when Liz completes her reserves and analysis, I think she has at least a phrase or a sentence in there that she has to talk. Because to me, methodology is just like, well, that's as good as cause. So methodology, I'd like to understand a little bit more about it, so.
But I guess
Bill,
one
think
key
you can
fact,
look under 2016.
Okay.
It's the 2016 one, it should be.
Yeah, I can't log in on the network here, it's not recognizing my account. But I mean, the key is, well, maybe not the key, but some solace is that this is happening to everyone. Everyone who's got this kind of liability, this is changing across the board. So it's nothing unique to the type of retirement accounts we have, it's just, it's happening across the board. So everyone's seeing this.
Everybody's doing it.
Probably doing other towns as well,
Right.
I presume. So
Yeah,
we are
every
not going to
town
be the only
is-
town to ask for explanations for the.
Yes, I think cities and towns are finally waking up to the fact that some of our pension assumptions and our OPEB assumptions are flawed. And slowly, we are unearthing them. I think when I say we, I think cities and towns everywhere
Right.
across the United States are taking a look at those things. So we're just, I think in many cases, we're ahead of the curve. I mean, these things are being done, but this is a good thing to have. I was going to, there are some things that I would like. There are some charts that we're working on, Divya and I, that have to do with the collective bargaining agreements. And we're putting some numbers in for full-time employment to match the bargaining units, the FTEs. For instance, we have a community development contract. We have a public works contract. These are all clerical contracts for finance, community development, public works, and community services. And each one of those departments has an FTE or two. And those FTEs are generally lumped into with the department that they serve.
Well, not, within the detail of the budget, every department breaks down the FTEs by detail.
And those details are at the back.
Well, they're in each
Usually,
individual budget section. So when you start in the financial detail of the budget, every department includes the individual FTEs within that department, and that ties back to the
So-
total FTE chart at the beginning.
okay, so that is what we're in the process of doing.
Sure.
Reconciling the FTEs that are shown in the budget to each one of these bargaining units.
Yes.
I don't know, I haven't discussed these changes or these edits with the rest of the committee. We're going to be doing that as we draft tonight. They may not like this chart. It may not survive. They might want to alter it. But I'm also putting personnel costs in a column opposite each and every contract.
And which contracts are you doing those for?
All of them.
Like school and town?
Yeah, school, in the minute,
School haven't done because they're doing school.
well, I did it.
I just would say that when you're sending a message with that document, it is always important, as someone who manages people, that we look at the town holistically, which is the
Yes.
conversation we've had. So whatever the group is deciding to do on the general government side, match it on the school side, because otherwise it creates the sentiment that we've been trying to get past, or have successfully got past for 6 years,
Right.
that there is a difference. There is no difference. So we can assist in that. I think some of it's pretty straightforward.
Well,
Public
yes.
safety is pretty straightforward. There's, but
So-
if we can help with the number of head count.
So I went online and just looked at every
good.
contract
Awesome.
on each side, municipal side and the other side, and got it. I learned things like, in the teacher's contract, for instance, the nurses are included.
Yes.
And there are other such interesting
Right.
pairings of things that go on that also affect the schools. So we, as I say, we haven't discussed this yet as a group, but I don't want to put out a chart that is going to be out of focus or incorrect. So if you
If we can
wanna
help with
look
that,
at
if
it
you want us
later,
to show,
yeah,
yeah,
okay.
that's right.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Great.
Can I bring up, so you have a copy of the warrant? I've given it to Bill. I don't
Yeah.
know, and I know it was fairly late, so I don't know if you've distributed that.
Yeah, everybody has it, yeah.
Great. If I can just introduce one topic, because it's going to, so the warrant has been changed today by one item. So generally speaking, around this time, it gets a little bit, as we try to close the warrant, We have a lot of folks looking at it to make sure it passes muster in a number of different, settings. Some of it's legal, some of it's grammatical, some of it's what's happening on the financial side and the like. You find around this time of the year that we're making a lot of little changes to it, although we're pretty close, quite frankly. I would say that the product provided bill and then to you represents, 95+% of the final product as we get close to the finish line. The Municipal Modernization Act passed in August of 2016 had a number of different provisions in it intended to make municipal finance less complicated. As the governor identified it, it was the municipal version of weed whacking, getting rid of a lot of the stuff that had grown over the years that we couldn't quite explain why. One of those provisions relates to revolving funds, which we have an annual article. I don't know what number it is in the package you have. It might be around 18.
It used to be 17.
17 or 18. So if you have that in, if you look at Article 17 in your current warrant books that you have, does it say
It's
revolving
on page
funds?
28.
I don't have it in front of me, so I apologize.
Okay, 17 is
Sewer.
Sewer enterprise.
Okay, so what's the,
Then the one after Stevenson Estate, the one
no,
before
it'd be,
water.
it'd be 4. It'd probably be before the budget. 13, great, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Page 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have been presenting revolving funds. So revolving funds under MGL 4453F and 1/2. Believe it or not, we do halves on municipal laws. Have been around for a long time, and in essence, it means that dollars generated of a particular type stay in that fund and can be spent out of that fund, as opposed to typical general fund spending where the revenue comes in over here, but we appropriate money over here, and they sort of run on these parallel tracks. Revolving funds allow you to take dollars in. So think simply of a library book fine type dollar amount. We did away with book fines, but library book fines in a lot of communities go into a revolving fund, where those dollars can then be spent by the library on other books. Okay? They survive a fiscal year, but they annually must be appropriated. And the format you have in front of you has been in North Andover for quite a long time. 10, 15, 20, however long. One of the things that changed in the Municipal Modernization Act was some of the specifics as it relates to those funds, and it's evolving because of this general feeling that the legislation, although constructed with the help of municipal folks, ultimately what was produced has created a little bit of confusion. So we're working with the Department of Revenue to try to figure out the best way to present that under the current statute, which changed in August. And that's likely going to force us to add a second article, which creates a bylaw for revolving funds. So a change under the statute is that now most of the actions of revolving funds can be moved to be a town bylaw. We originally read that as a may, not shall, meaning our option. I was perfectly fine, quite frankly, is continuing to present for the next 10 years of my life here the way it was. Reads well, everybody understands it. There seems to be some confusion of now if we're compelled to make it a bylaw rather than an article. I like the transparency of an article, quite frankly. So we're working with the DOR and the DOR's attorneys, but it sounds like in order to get past this year, until the legislature and the Department of Revenue can sort it out, we're going to be required to add an article which creates a bylaw which allows us to use these funds, and then a second article which looks largely like you have in front of you. Sorry to create the confusion because it's confusing for us too. But in essence, we're likely to have to add an article to make sure that we comply with the law currently until there can be clarity on that. So we're still going to show all the same information, but instead of being in one article, it's going to appear in 2 articles.
That's going to shift all our article numbers.
Oh yeah, your article numbers are shifting.
Okay.
Okay, that's important for
Create
me.
a new table for you.
This eliminates the weed whacking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This,
Okay.
most of the weed whacking is pretty good. This
Can't do an A
one,
and B.
this one added a few more weeds.
Can't do an A and B?
Yeah.
Subset.
Yeah, we were fine with how it's, the intention of the statutory change really was around the fact that within this article, we set the maximum spending limit of each of the individual revolving funds. And the intention of the statute, one of the primary intentions, was to eliminate that requirement. Because I can tell you from a municipal finance perspective, every year trying to figure out how much that amount should be. Sounds easy, it's a little trickier than it sounds. So the idea of the statute was to eliminate that requirement. The town meeting would no longer need to vote on that maximum. And so the mechanism they created was, well, okay, if we just make them a bylaw, you'll never need to vote it again. But they never eliminated the need to appropriate money out of those funds. So the article is still gonna have to be intact. So in essence, we're gonna likely end up with 2 articles to accomplish what we've historically done with 1, with some hope that there's clarity over the next couple of months and we get back down to 1 article.
So you're gonna be able to explain that at town meeting?
No way. Right. So I'm trying to, and it may change back to when you get the warrant next time. So right now, we've added that second article, but I have a call tomorrow with legal counsel for the Department of Revenue, and my preference would be, can we just leave it the same until that gets sorted out? And then figure it out next year and show 1 article, rather than having to do exactly what I did for you on town meeting floor. Although I would say if you folks are okay, I haven't historically found that town meeting stops at this article and asks a whole bunch of questions. But I know you folks will have some, and so I wanted to explain it to you.
So you're going to have a discussion with the Department of Revenue that centers on the interpretation of the word may. Is that right?
I think we're clear on may and shall. It's just the statute includes 5 paragraphs in which may appears in the first paragraph and shall appears in the third paragraph. And so it's competing mays and shalls.
It's so sloppy.
It's competing mays and shalls.
Okay.
I have my own interpretation of mays and shalls as it relates to
Okay, but when you mix them in a little bag.
when you mix them in a little bag and come out there, there's some, and I've noticed, with no disrespect to your profession, when you
me.
put mays and shalls in the same bag, shalls seem to come to the top faster than mays. So when there's competing mays and shalls, it always reverts to shall.
Okay, I understand that, and it's
You do?
It's
That's
the
good.
legislature who does that.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay.
So they
us,
did attempt
us
to,
practicing lawyers pull our hair out with that,
I'm sure you
and
do.
we get a lot of clients for it, or we did. Okay.
So they attempted to file legislation, put it in the supplemental budget. It didn't make muster on the supplemental budget, so at some point, we'll have to do a little more weed whacking to clear it up. In the meantime, it'll be clear as mud at town meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
No problem.
Okay. Anything else?
Any other questions on the warrant articles while I'm here? Because I may not be here at the time you vote on them, but if there's, they're pretty straightforward, I think.
Yeah.
They appear to be.
The finance ones are pretty straightforward.
Fine, that's what I meant. Just strictly sticking to finance. I have no comment on the rest.
So the marijuana article is a zoning article,
Yes, it is.
and
Thank God.
therefore it's not at the stage yet where it could become a financial article.
I would not interpret the marijuana article as financial. No.
Not yet.
I would not
Y-
interpret the
okay.
marijuana article as financial.
The curriculum revolving fund, where did that end up? I am not seeing
Curriculum
that.
revolving fund within the article we just spoke about, Article
Yeah.
13, is in the listed items of revolving funds.
Okay.
So in that list of 12, 13, 14 various revolving funds, the curriculum revolving fund, I believe, is near the bottom of that list.
Okay, but we didn't have to do anything special to establish that fund?
No,
I thought I
that
had in my
article
notes.
does it.
It does it? Okay, it actually establishes it.
We have a
Okay.
very efficient article that you have to do establish and appropriate.
All in one.
And in essence, you also have to, every year, vote to reestablish. We do that with a single article.
Okay, for all the revolving funds.
Right now, it's,
Gotcha.
but by next week, when you get the warrant, there'll be 2 articles, but
But for the, yes, I,
Yes.
okay, but
That's the norm, we would do it as one article.
one article.
Yeah.
If you don't vote
Okay.
one of those, it closes, and the funds that would be left in it would close to the general fund.
Correct.
Okay.
But we can consistently vote the same ones and add 1 or 2 every
Okay.
so many, not even.
I mean, I thought that was kind of an important point in our school. I didn't see it dealt with anywhere, but I think that that was, you know, a very important point to make, that we're being more aggressive about getting those Medicaid reimbursements in order to bring them in and then fund curriculum development.
We're not sure that there's another revolving fund of that type in the state.
Right, and I think that's something we might want to highlight somewhere in our report, because that's my reason for hunting for it in the articles. Thanks.
Great. Good, thank you.
Thank you.
You want to knock off minutes, or do you want to?
By the union, because that is really resulting into a lot of confusion with respect to numbers. Because I checked,
Yeah, Tim, I thought you would want to know about that.
like, for example, yes,
Tim, I thought you would want to know about that.
Yeah.
I just forwarded everyone a copy of what Lynn sent me.
I finally gave up. If you see, I deleted one column.
Yeah, you know, I was amazed.
background.
I mean, I did the salient parts of them, like say who's covered by it.
Yes, I did, everything.
Okay.
And I was trying to jot it down and stuff, and then finally I said no.
All right, should we knock out the minutes first and then do the letter? So we have two sets of minutes. We have March 7th and March 21st. So. Okay, do we have any, a motion relative to the minutes of March 7th, 2017?
I hereby move that we approve the meetings of, or the minutes of the meeting from March 7th, 2017 as presented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the minutes of March 21st. Any questions?
I thought I asked a lot of questions that meeting, but. Didn't you request the sped numbers in that meeting?
No, it's in the previous,
That's a concern, but not that you received, that you requested you received.
No, we should
in
have
the previous meeting, Dr. Price commented we may need to access up to $250,000 for the Special Education Stabilization Fund. That was in the March 7th.
And we
Right.
just approved, right.
Right, but I thought they were going to give us details on
Remember
that.
So no,
last
so
year
the-
they gave us that one pager that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we should,
But-
we should have that, in fact, because I asked Jim for that
Yes.
a couple weeks ago. So I think I asked it for as current as possible, so maybe since the month just closed. I'll send him another note. It's probably just going to be updated at month end. If, you know, if the month ended on Friday. We'll make sure we have it for next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
I asked for it if you want.
Yeah. I did twice, so,
Yeah.
sure?
I asked for something else from you.
Okay, anything, any motion relative to the minutes of March 21st?
I hereby move we approve the minutes dated March 21st, 2017.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So now we're,
Do you really want to hang around for us to go through them?
This is when the paint really starts to dry.
Oh, maybe you sometimes feels off the wall.
It's like watching paint dry.
I think I'm probably good at it. I just, one, Bill, one quick comment. I tried to look at the minutes online, these two copies, and I could see the first page and then all the other pages were dead in that PDF.
okay.
Angela, so I think something's wrong with the printer, because some of our pages, the double side didn't work either.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it must be something's up with the printer settings or something.
The print settings when you convert to PDF?
Not on the,
Oh.
not on the, minutes, but on some of the budget documents
But
that were in our
they
packet.
weren't- they
You're
weren't
saying the
good.
minutes were
Yeah.
also.
I just moved the documents that I had right into a
Yeah.
file,
So
they
it's
didn't
probably
move-
the print,
Yeah, they didn't print out on the double side, though.
and then did you scan it?
I just moved them into
Oh.
that file, that's all I did.
Were they Word or PDF on the,
Can you just check the last couple minutes?
Let me see.
Online, the public minutes, and make
Yep.
sure that all pages are there?
These two,
These
they were,
are
these
the
two
7th
never
and
linked to
the
the agenda.
21st.
I I can see the first page.
But that's a separate issue from the stuff tonight.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have two issues. One is printing, the other is. It might just be the.
Then I have,
Thank you.
Printing out a color and legal. Oh, so fancy. Did we start on that?
Okay, all right. So we're good? Okay, first thing is on what I think we should do in this one is we should talk about the substance of what we want to do. Because I know, like, for example, with this new report, I'm going to have to update my whole section, like change a bunch of numbers. But that's fine. I can do that over the course of the week.
Why do you have to change a whole bunch of numbers?
Because I talk about OPEB, and if the liability went from
Right.
86 to 107, I got to change a bunch of numbers. So, but I think we should talk kind of broad themes first, because, you know, tonight we can talk policy, and then we can go through a little bit of it. I think if we have agreement on the direction we want to take, it's going to make it easier for people to edit, because I don't think we can do both things at the same time. So I think that that's sort of what we want to do.
Here's my edits.
Okay.
The collective bargaining agreement.
All right.
One of the things that it's important to note is that I talked to Jen about this today. This draft that's in the Google Drive is not based on the final that went into the warrant letter. They're completely
Really?
different.
Okay.
They're not the same document.
Well, I'm comfortable enough with what's there to.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, if
Yeah.
you're trying to work from what the final, for me, it's a big deal because
You
this
have all
chart
the chart.
changed significantly
Yeah.
between that one and the one that actually went into the final warrant letter. So for me, it was like
The
a,
most recent one I could find, because I think when the final edits were done and given, it didn't stay in.
Okay.
it didn't go back to
Dropbox,
Google Drive or,
And then
yeah, or
to
whatever it
Google
was.
Drive when we moved.
Okay.
So we're not using Dropbox anymore.
We are not and haven't.
I just took it off of.
Okay.
What's, sorry.
All right. So
I can't find my notes. I'm trying to do two things.
speaking towards the philosophical.
Yes. Can I?
All right. Go ahead, Jen.
Make a first proposal, because I don't
Yeah.
mind people ripping me. So, this is so much fun. I would like it if this overall theme could focus on these 4 items: OPED, the schools, the revenue, I don't know if we can on that, and the reserves.
so talk about, we all sort of have an idea about OPEB. And that really came as a
Well, do we
shock.
all understand that? Okay.
Okay, we'll go back to, what's your idea on revenue?
And I don't think we can speak on it, the idea of needing,
Why is it a major topic of revenue? I'm asking a stupid question on purpose.
no, you're not
I
asking a
think you're
stupid
relating
question.
it back to here, so I think that's better context.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm relating to the
That's what we are.
context of our expenses going now and going forward, and how we're going to be able to cover them in the future. So maybe it's inappropriate for this letter. I realize that. I think I did this last year too, I brought up revenue.
Well,
And we said we were supposed to focus on
in
expense.
general, for operating costs, and if that's your concern, in general, when you're trying to have enough revenue for operating costs, it's gonna go up 4%. Just throw a number out there, and you say it there.
Yeah.
Right,
Revenue's gonna go up 4%.
common, yeah.
And we have to manage our cost within that. Unless something dramatic and drastic has to happen, and this is where we may all have differences of opinion, but I'm of the opinion that we maintain our 4% increase in revenue to cover operating cost. And if we can't do that, then something's gotta be cut.
I just,
Cause
that need to be stated.
So I think, and the conversations that Jen and I had throughout the weekend and writing the section about schools led to some other larger conversations, more from a macro level, that are definitely more kind of theoretical in sense. So basically saying that, you know, if you look at Dr. Price's recommendations, for example, by 2019, the goal is to reduce the percentage of classes K-5 that exceed our class guidelines to only 10%. That's largely probably because the new kindergarten will be open, so you have the availability to do that. But if with a 4% revenue and then expense increase, we're not even meeting the goals outlined by the school committee, then perhaps we need to, in some way, manage expectations on what's achievable within the current structure of our budget.
So you guys did the math and said if you take over the next 3 years and we add 0.5% additional to the school budget year over year, right? So you guys ran the numbers and said, if we add 0.5%, because this is the basic way I look at the class size initiative. We're taking the normal cost of business is roughly 3%. We're fixing some things that were broken,
Yes.
roughly 0.5%.
Yep.
And then we're investing in more teachers for 0.5% of that increase. So that's about 0.5% of
45 or so.
yeah, 0.5% of 47 is what? Like 500,000?
Yeah.
You know?
No,
it's less than that. It's 300,000.
It's 3 something
Yeah.
that at least she's come up
Yeah.
with.
So that's,
Right?
so you're saying that
Two to
even if
three
we add
bonds.
those teachers every year,
Well,
we're not gonna have enough teachers to meet
It's,
class size
I
goals?
think it's about the timeline. I think it's about the fact that our goal already is 22, we're at 28. How do we get to the school committee goal of 22 per class? It will take 7 to 10 years. If we're only giving a 4% raise a year, it'll take that long. Again, I know we're not supposed to have a position of forward thinking, but I also would, it needs to be said, it's going to take that long if we stick with 4% a year.
Well, I think I'll just lay it out and then
Yes.
I'll sit back
Yeah.
and talk. But I think the thing that the committee could say is to say, the school committee has a goal of doing X.
yes.
Yes.
It's
exactly.
saying that this is based on spending Y additional dollars per year. We don't think that can happen. I mean, if we run the numbers and say, Dr. Price, we don't think this gets you there, that's something that's reasonable.
Or-
I don't think,
we-
it's not our job to
but we
say
don't run the
we don't
if
need-
we should do it or how we should do it. It's our job to say,
But I
can
think-
it
I don't
be done?
even,
concerned it
I don't
may not
even
be
know,
able to be
I don't
done.
even know if you have to go that far, right? Because I don't want to take too hard line of a position in, I guess, educating or talking to the community about what we need to do to get there. But perhaps say under the current policies, or, we will not be able to achieve.
You have to approve with the numbers. You have to approve it with calculations of sorts.
Is your text in there?
Yes.
Yeah, our text
And
is,
your numbers are in there?
No, we didn't,
Yeah,
this is
but-
not something we addressed
Just
this.
the text. Okay.
We didn't address this point without understanding what the rest of the finance committee's position was and how we wanted to convey that message.
okay, but hold on, we're losing sight of the fact, we need to decide the overall theme of this letter.
Agree.
And I brought up the word revenue. I did this last year, I need to stop with you guys. The reason we brought up revenue is because we did not do projections, but are looking forward.
We just
I don't think we should.
we just invested 10 minutes in this topic, and I actually think what Bill actually had to say was very good, and here's the reason. What you're doing is documenting a disconnect. And bear with me on this, and people are gonna go, oh, okay, and they'll move on, or they're gonna say, wait a minute, I think we as a community ought to do something about it. That's the thing you're doing with the factual information as Bill presented it here. I really truly believe what he said was like, geez, guys, wake up, smell the coffee. And either Dr. Price has to say more realistic, which is outside this,
Yes,
or
but is this the place to do it in?
we got 2 pieces of information this year, right? Dr. Price's goal and realistic revenue growth. I'm just saying, we don't have to, but I thought it was actually a pretty good observation on you guys' part to bring it up.
Well, I think we can go back as long as everyone feels like it's appropriate to add a paragraph or so with some supporting numerical information to say in the appropriate way to convey our message and to say, hey, here's what we're seeing. Then we can go back and do that.
I wouldn't drag out to a paragraph. 2 sentences might do the trick, honestly.
Yes.
But it's
But the work behind it,
absolutely, it's heavy. It's really heavy stuff. I
Are
don't
you
like
gonna
it.
footnote it?
No,
What?
I wouldn't footnote it.
you mean reference where we got the data from?
Oh,
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, yes. I thought you mentioned the whole topic. No.
Oh, okay.
But do we want to do this?
Well,
Because
well,
we're gonna need,
I
you
can-
can speak for yourself if you think you could do it. We might need some
I
outside help
have to
with
see
these.
I
where
can-
those numbers are
Fine.
going. And I
Yeah.
would really need to see, to make sure that they get debugged. And I'm not too sure what the debugging process will be. I mean, who should do it?
What, do what?
Double check our numbers.
Double check your
Double
numbers
check
and
our
your
numbers.
assumptions.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is we could say that we want to do this, but there needs to be a double check in our group here.
And then, okay,
who-
in,
do we have the
within
time
the
and can
group
we-
or?
I don't mind double checking.
No, I mean,
No. I
You
mean,
state your assumptions, and we
Right.
already have, the assumptions are already built in,
Right.
period. Dr. Price says I want X, bottom line, long-term revenue growth says Y. Disconnect.
There's only a couple things you can do.
Right.
Right.
It's not hard.
Well, I guess
And
we
there's only a
sh-
couple ways you can do it, so
We might as well draft it and then
we'll
let
figure
them.
it out. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, okay, so going back to the main theme of the letter.
yeah. Main theme of the letter, okay. Main theme of the letter. Well,
Themes.
from my standpoint, I would like to have a part that focuses on personnel expense.
Yeah.
And explains it to the public in a graphic way and maybe a little bit in a word way. That lays out, so they can see the playing field that we're operating in, which are these 12 to 14 bargaining units with all of these people in them, how many people we employ, what they do, what these contracts are looking like. They have these step increases, and I've examined some of the step increases, and I find that in some of the contracts, these 3-year contracts, the second and third year of the contracts are about the same. There's not much increase between the second and third year in some of them, which is basically, when I look at those contracts, I think I see that the two negotiating parties, on the town or the school committee on one hand, and the union on the other, bargaining unit on the other, are being realistic about what's happening outside in the economic community. What is an expected rate of, pay increases? And I think that in this bit by bit of renegotiation of these contracts that come up, every year there are contracts that are coming due. So it's a rolling forward type thing. That bit by bit, some realism about pay increases is encroaching, is happening. So we're making some progress there. In those contracts, which don't show that leveling between year 2 and 3, or leveling all the way along, in those contracts, and they would typically be, I'm going to say, fire and police. What we have seen, and I think the numbers bear it out, I hope they do, again this year, I think they do, that the folks who are entitled to things like sick leave and other time off benefits under those contracts are watching themselves. And they are voluntarily reining themselves in. They are voluntarily taking less sick leave, so they are actually restraining, they're using their benefits more judicially.
And this is important to address.
This is important to address because, you see, you've got some employees who are trying to help. They're trying to help the town
Yes.
save money. And they're doing that
At their own.
by saying, well, maybe we're not wanting people to go to work when they're sick, but we want them not to use every last, unless they really want to, every last benefit in that contract. I think you see some restraint.
But
And
do you think that the town doesn't believe there is restraint, and that's why we need to present
No, I
this?
think-
No, I think that you need
The
to
town
show
people.
that. To the
That-
townspeople, to show that the
Largest
town
cost.
manager and the school, the town manager in particular, has created an environment here of, that makes it possible for employees like this to want to help the town save money. Now, you're looking at me.
I'm only looking because I think it's an area that we haven't, it's like personnel cost is this of the entire budget.
Right.
And it really deserves that attention. And people should say, oh yeah, if you said,
80% of the town budget is labor,
Yeah.
personnel cost, whatever the number is. And people go, wow, what are we doing to control it? You
But-
get the story, you have the story.
You have the story, and so we put the numbers along one column, and in the text, I've tried to describe
Right.
what we may see coming off of those numbers.
It's a good news story.
It's a good news story.
I think it's a great idea. I thought the question was, how do we start this document? With what major themes? So what?
Yeah, I
let's
mean,
go
I guess
back
the
to
question
original
is kind of,
question,
is-
Because I looked
are
at the
we-
first
when we
page
do
and
it,
second, what's the first set of messages?
I mean, I look at it almost like the State of the Union, right? Like, every, so you come in and you say, like,
Right, this,
the first paragraph hasn't changed in 3 years.
No.
This is what we do. The second paragraph is,
I almost wish we could have put that first, to be honest, but.
the second paragraph is, generally speaking, we're doing well. That's the executive summary. We can afford, we're operating within our fiscal limits. We can afford this budget without, this is a structurally sound, sustainable budget. So I think that's the number one sort of overarching theme. And then I think we can go, we could decide what we want to put up front in terms of priorities. I mean, I put
Yeah, so you put,
OPEB up front.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What is this paragraph, the next one, the next one, the next one, whatever
Yeah.
our main.
Okay, so let's go through them.
Yeah.
Is
So-
OPEB the first, because that was the first message I heard when I read this, right?
Right. No,
That's our
it's up
number
front.
one concern. Is that our number one concern as a group?
I mean, I think it is because if you run the numbers, right?
It's a huge number, first of
Yeah.
all.
We're going from, it goes from like, maybe a few years ago it was 3% of the budget. In
No.
4 years, it'll be 5% of the budget.
That's
So
right.
that's
Cannot ignore it.
2% of the budget.
Yeah.
That's,
You
Yes.
cannot ignore it. It's,
It's-
you
it's
can't
the-
get down the road.
It's singly the largest
Risk.
this
Without
town
question.
has.
And it's a flat.
What
But we're
happens
not-
when
and the
you also
important thing,
add
though, is we're not alone in that.
additional?
And well, this is
teachers
right.
for
all
It's
needs.
a
That's
very
absolutely-
flashy,
You know, so
popular topic.
Yeah,
Right,
I
but it
mean,
also
we talk
negates
about
that
it,
when
but we
somebody
also
says
have
you
to
have
stress we're not
reserves.
alone in this.
Right,
We're not,
oh,
it's
it's
not.
fiscal response when you have reserves, you can spend, wait a minute, we still have this enormous debt out there. So I agreed with this being the very first paragraph. I'd say a little more graphical and visual would be nice,
Mhm.
with a few more numbers, but I think you didn't have them. So now you're gonna have some real
Some real big
numbers.
So what about putting after open some information about the conversation we just had instead of putting it in the school section? And
Sure.
not having it just school
I think you
focused
could,
and having it be more, because it relates back to OPEB that you're going to be incurring the cost of X additional teachers as well over a certain time span.
Right, like OPED, school, and then staffing maybe.
And that school and staffing kind of go together, because
Yes.
you're talking about adding on additional teachers, those are very, intertwined,
Without question,
essentially.
because the human
Yeah.
is the biggest.
Tim's
Yeah.
thinking.
I am, only because placement of things such as personnel and OPEB, those are huge things.
Well, isn't this a summary paragraph that then leads you to flip through to the more extensive
I look at it,
information?
I mean, my paragraph is really, it's really not a full explication of OPEB. It's basically like,
We have our eyes on it.
it's basically like, I went back and I kind of read it, and, I read what we wrote last year, and I said, we put this up front last year, and we said we want to see more action, and nothing came out of it. So part of it, in my perspective, from a small p political perspective, is to say, like, hey, last year I said we should take a look. Last year we said, I shouldn't say I said, but I wrote it, but last year we said this is important. This year we got $200,000, which doesn't really move the needle. It's kind of like,
But that's what I'm saying.
It's kinda
I
like
think
your
this
layaway gift,
paragraph
you know,
should
it's
be
like-
here, and then not a footnote, maybe a note at the end where you could go to the other page to read more if you wanted. So that her staffing would be a summary, and then,
Well,
Yeah.
we're talking about.
themes
you know,
versus structure.
This is the structure, executive summary.
yeah.
Nothing to worry about, but looking long-term, these are the things we need to look at.
Yeah.
Right.
OPEB, personnel costs, by the way, and most of your stuff you were just talking about will be in the body of the report, not in the executive summary. But I think it's important to say, despite this huge risk out there with OPEB, we counter it with personnel. And then, but what you just said, give people good news, heading into good news. I was thinking about, geez, do you really want to flash a school head ratio or the disconnect up front? No, but maybe what you want to do is the school is addressing some critical things such as the kindergarten facility to help ease some of the space constraints for a good price. In other words, the school department is doing something smart. And then we get into the body of the school department and that right up there. I mean, it is 47 million or so dollars of the budget. What's the good news there?
Right.
Or what is the story there? And then they can bury the disconnect in the body of the report, which I think is important to have.
Yeah.
I think it's, because one of the things that came out of one of the meetings with Dr. Price was very clear that she's not going to force the head count because she's got open spaces, classrooms available. Because I would take the position, I was taking the position early on, if you were planning on filling those empty classrooms with teachers, you better get on a different program. Because that ain't gonna happen, at least not while I'm here. If you can get there gradually, yeah. But, so I still think there's a good news about her goal, her attempt of trying to get there, and us actually applauding it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good news story, but I think that's exactly what our function is to examine the numbers and the assumption and the feasibility. I think that's fine to say that.
It's not just with the schools. It goes back to OPEB. If your expenses are increasing more than your revenue,
And we're losing state
and I'm not
funding.
saying, and I'm not.
And we're losing more state funding each year.
So I don't think we need to state a solution to that or recommend one. I think we just need
acknowledge
to acknowledge, and so that someone reading this in 2 years can say, they were talking about this then because they recognized it and since have been working, other parties have been working towards a solution.
And you could go back and you could read, and I've read like 10 years of warrant letters. You could go back and you could read 20 years of warrant letters, and they all say the same thing. Like, our revenues as a town can go up 2.5% plus new growth. And we've been lucky to have a bunch of new growth over the past few years. That's the fluctuating part of it. And then a couple good years on excise tax and some other cats and dogs. But that's the fundamental story in municipal finance is anything that goes up over 2.5% is unsustainable, right? Like if everything went up 2.5% and the taxes went up 2.5%, we'd all be fine. But that's not what happens. If healthcare goes up by 7% and pension costs goes up by 7%, something else has to increase more slowly, or decrease, and I think we've found a bunch of those things over the past few years, and it really is a question of, like, I think Andrew's very good at looking under the couch covers for,
Split change.
yeah, 50,000 here, 20,000 there, pilot, things like that.
It has. This is
But-
bigger than.
We've
But-
gained 6 years, right, of operational efficiencies.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
at
but
some
now-
point, the gains of
Yeah.
those
You can't
efficiencies
squeeze and
Right.
go any more lean
Yeah.
than you are.
Yeah.
We're as lean as we can.
Well, I think there was actually one year when we didn't go up to the 2.5%.
There was a year, yeah.
Mm-hmm. 2 years ago. We didn't say, okay, the usual formula
Yes.
for cities and towns, and
Tighten the
which
belts
is
even tighter.
two
is
and a
what you're
half.
saying.
We go up 2.5%, and that's it.
We had some found money
We,
then.
okay, we had some found money then. You might be saying go up 2.25%.
So perhaps it's more of and it doesn't have to be a paragraph, but more of a managing expectations couple sentences in there where we're kind of
Yeah, I mean,
tying it all
think
back together.
I think it would be fine to say that. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's a perfectly appropriate thing for us to say, that the class size goal is, I don't know if we can get there, or the school's ambitions, might not be on this path and not attainable.
You could actually have
Under-
a graph. To your point.
Are you guys okay with these major themes? I mean, I know we're all talking here, but the idea of OPED and school and staffing being the executive summary?
I would focus only on one meeting. just
And
pick
I don't-
one. 'Cause, I mean, it's so long, you know. I mean, I already, you know, have
Your
a hard
section
time
is
going
so
through from top to beginning, and I'm part of the, you know, what do we really want to say? And I think, and that's my theme from the beginning: the OPEB, healthcare, pension. You know,
But
that's,
isn't that all part of the same theme, that the current liabilities are going to potentially be increasing
Greater
more
than the
our revenue stream?
revenue.
I mean,
Oh,
is that-
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
ultimately, that's really what, I mean, I don't know. And part of that is, a huge part of that is OPEB, and then it's other, and it goes down like this.
There's definitely conflicting goals, and, you know, the OPEB sucking in more and more of our money, and the pensions as well, you know, at the expense of other budgets. such
Yeah,
as
I think
across the school.
it's the past versus the future. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, it's
Yes.
obligations that we made
Yes.
and that we have to,
Work
you know, it's like being a millennial and trying to get out from under your credit card debt, you know.
How much?
Sorry.
Remind me, how much time do we have?
You're a millennial
before we have to
representative,
lock this
so.
later down, this document?
It has to be done by
The
next week.
13th, yeah.
Next which?
The 13th.
The 13th.
So I think, what are you thinking about? You just want to go roughly over the whole thing, Phil? or-
I mean, I think that, part of the reason, I guess to the point, we gotta figure out, what do we wanna do? Do we wanna be comprehensive, or do we wanna be punchy? Yeah, I mean,
You know my vote on that.
I don't mean
What
punchy, I mean
Thematic?
Short,
direct. You know,
direct,
direct, but-
2-page, done, which is what I said last year.
But I also think that, I don't think our audience is necessarily, I mean, let's think about this document in a sense. I mean, who's our audience? It's people who come to town
Okay,
meeting,
but hold
or
on.
who read the warrant, right?
Okay, but it will not be, if this was written in a short, can we use your term for now, punchy way, this will be broadcasted all over town. I'm not gonna let it just sit at the town meeting for those that are sitting there reading it anymore.
Mhm.
I don't think it should be, I think we need to think a little bit broader than that and bigger than that.
You know,
I'm not asking any of you to do that, but I'm.
I have no disagreement with that at all. I mean, in a way, when you're focused on your own section,
Right.
And I'm guilty of this, I wrote my enterprise fund section, and talked about the same length for the sewer and the water, but on the Stevens estate, I'm proud of them, so I made it longer.
Yeah,
I'm gonna cut it back, I'm cutting them all back.
yeah.
I would only like to.
Well, what do we want? I mean, do we wanna write an
I'm
executive
some-
summary?
and
We wanna
that's-
write an executive summary about our priorities, and then have the rest as, I mean, there's one thing, I think there's one thing that we forget that we do that nobody else does. Like, we're the only group in town, the selectmen don't do a deep dive on them. They definitely set their priorities, and they go ahead and they, you know, at that point, it's kind of run. So we're the ones who actually examine the departments and have them come in front of us and take a look at it.
We're
And
doing
so I
deep
feel kind of
dives.
like we're the auditors, and, you know, audit report has to have certain things in it, right? Like, you have to, you can't leave out
Why can't we do both
certain
then?
things.
If that's,
So
if
that's
the
what
issue,
I'm
right?
saying,
Right,
like,
so-
do we wanna have an executive summary up front that says,
And then your more lengthy
Or
sections.
what
and
if
then the
after-
sections that,
Or what if, or what if you just do both, so you can follow your format, and then
No, the
someone.
format is, the executive summary is our major issues, and then we each have our sections that are in more depth.
Elaborate, yeah.
We've already done most of the hard work, I would say.
So that
I mean,
you can do it, you can distribute the executive summary to whatever.
Then the executive summary is the only thing that gets distributed to the mass public.
Okay, so fine, so you have a punchy executive summary. that
Exactly.
you can get out in social network, blah, blah,
And
blah.
that might be as far as anybody reads, even in the town meeting,
It
because
might
like
be.
Tom, I did get
Anybody
stuck
else
on page 2.
You know, wants more detail, they can
Keep
say,
going.
oh yeah, these guys were really looking at this.
That's right.
So I'm looking at Tom's because one of the largest segments of our budget is the capital. And, you know,
In the executive summary, I don't hear anything but capital. We're talking about OPEB, we're talking about personnel, maybe school. But if we're gonna do something, executive summary, we need something punchy from the critical areas. Like, for example, if someone says the enterprise funds, I'll have 2 short sentences for your punchy stuff. Personnel, capital, you ought to say maybe 3 sentences in the executive summary that covers it. and reserves, all that stuff ought to be covered, right, in the executive summary? And then it's a tearaway sheet. Here you go. Oh, you want to read more? There's more. That's not a bad idea. Bill, what do you think?
It's really long.
Yeah, but,
Right,
it's,
the whole document.
but Tim,
No, the whole document
There's
is but the exact sentence.
really, when you look at the investment, the CIP, there's really nothing to report.
No.
If we would go to like a 20%, 25%, of revenue, yeah, then that's an issue. But I would, it's a sustainable to stay below 5%, and that's where we stay. There's really nothing to report. I mean,
So
it
that's
confirms it's,
It's working.
it's balanced, it's not unreasonable high.
So I agree with,
So-
but you know what?
So
I
it's not,
agree.
it's not first page material, it's just confirming, the process works.
But you know what, when I'm thinking about this, it's not so much a newspaper article where, I'm thinking of, this is a tearaway sheet. And someone would say, so what about my CapEx? And my CapEx is within 5% of the revenue, and everything's fine, done. And the enterprise funds, no rate increases. And
Right.
by the way, the Stevens Estate is paying for itself and then some, reinvesting. School, similar things. And I actually like that idea, so, because you're right, no one reads the whole damn thing.
But I think it's important to acknowledge, I think at some level, that this, what you've said about an audit report, this letter or report has become sort of our committee's proof of the year. It is our summary that we've actually done the deep dive. And it's almost like we have to do it for that purpose. I like it because it says, okay, we're acting carefully. It sets a tone for future committees that this is the level of detail that we want to see because we think it's that important.
But I guess I agree with you.
But I like the executive summary,
That's
again,
it. This is a
because then you can
structural
say, okay, here you go. For the person that just doesn't want to get into the deep dive and doesn't really, really care about what's under the covers, fine. They can look at the, they can look at the bedspread. But, for everybody that wants to go down and look at all the quilts underneath, they're there, and we did the work. And it's important to document that, I think, not just, as an audit. Basically, it's an audit report.
I'm agreeing with you.
Here's
So that's
my
what we're doing
only
with structure.
issue. Everything within the budget, everything that's been determined by the budget is going to stay within the budget. Nobody's been allowed to go outside of the budget. Nobody's been
Yeah,
offered
but the
the
budgets
opportunity.
itself are sustainable, they stay within the whatever percentage we agreed on, 3 point, or was it not 4 point, right?
Yeah, it was 4 this year.
So it's not an excessive increase in any of
Right.
the,
Right.
I would also see that letters should be a guideline for us, because, we talk, 95% of the things we talk, we know already from the beginning, they're sustainable.
Right.
Yes.
They're not going
Yes.
excessive, they're not going to hire 100 teachers, they're not going to hire 100
Right.
police officers, and we'll spend all the time. And then we'll say, we're not spending enough time actually on retirement, OPEB, pension, all that wave coming towards us. When was it on the agenda that we actually talked? This year, we
Yeah,
didn't
that's a
talk
good
it
point.
at all, So I agree, we should confirm, in general, that the budget is sustainable. But we see as a finance committee, there's a looming
There's
risk
looming,
of a
yeah.
liability coming towards us, and we're not doing enough. So that's why I liked actually the beginning, because that's for me the theme of this budget round.
So-
That again, yes, it's there, but we didn't address it.
Would you suggest, Thomas, that be part of a major topic here? In other words, you say, hey, yeah, what's your one takeaway?
Yeah.
So embarrassingly enough, is the one, I agree with you, we didn't spend any time on the OPEB. That's the one takeaway we want people to see. And oh, by the way, let's look at real quickly the rest of the budget. And then, again, I like to see it as a tearaway sheet, so people go, okay, everything else is good, but this OPEB's really got me concerned. And therefore, it covers exactly what you're trying to do, but it also covers all of our other areas real quickly. And again, we're only talking about the summary sheet right now, Bill. And my thinking is that everyone else comes in with their 500-page document that backs it up, and the warrant letter's gonna be this thick.
Okay, fine. That's good. And shouldn't we be calling this letter a report?
Yes, I mean. the
That
mistake-
is what it's called,
my fault.
actually.
Yeah,
It is called a report.
Okay, I mean, that is
Yeah.
a report. That's the
Yes.
name of the
Yeah.
document.
I am changing.
It is a report.
Well, then,
Well,
can
So,
somebody tell me, can you tell me
why don't we
where
just
that
figure out the-
document is?
Yeah.
I mean, is that thing in the Google?
In the Google.
Yeah.
It's in Google
It is.
Drive.
It is.
Well, doctor.
Jennifer sent us a link. She sent us a link directly to this document.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, look, my notebook crashed, had a hard drive
Yes.
crash last
Ah.
week, brought it to the doctor.
Do you want me to
Fix the hard drive.
send you the email again with the?
We don't need a hard drive anymore.
Oh, well, okay, exactly. Exactly, so I'm working, every time I turn that computer on now, the whole software, everything in it freezes. It takes 2 hours for the laptop to launch.
Oh, man.
So what do you,
hours.
yeah, Bill's like,
The-
just get a new one.
Yeah, I have one thing to tell you.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's what you want.
That's what I
That
want.
never happens with these.
Yeah.
That's what I have, dear. And
Really?
you know, I do, but
Oh my gosh.
these latest operating systems like Yosemite and Sierra,
Mhm.
ugh.
Yeah,
And it screws up your Wi-Fi really bad. So I got my iPad thing
Right.
here, and I put all
Yeah,
the
you should be
Google
fine.
Well,
things
then
on
you
here.
could do it on there.
Yeah.
But I only figured that out yesterday.
Okay.
Okay.
Ah.
So, but when I go into Google, I can't find that
Come
thing.
over with your
You
chat
need
and
to
I'll help you.
log in with
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay,
Gmail
hold on a
account.
second, because I
Okay.
need to understand where we are.
Yeah, but I need, okay.
So
Yeah.
we'll get you,
How do we
we'll get
do
you
it?
straightened away, and here's what I think we should do. Here's what I would argue we should do right now. I think there's a couple other issues we should talk about from a thematic perspective. But Jen, why don't you just write up the front page?
I'm the worst writer on
You want me,
the
okay, you want
No,
me
I
to try
wanna-
to, like, I think we should come in next week and have the executive summary done pretty much the way we want it, right?
But isn't your section
And our
already
sections-
part of that right there?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
part of it.
I can do the outline of it, but don't ask me to actually write
Okay.
the content, okay?
All right, I mean,
don't want to do it tomorrow morning or tonight.
I'm happy to write it. I would punch it down and I could rearrange some
Yeah.
things. So do we want to just,
You're
so we
basically going
just
to
say
take
like,
that and parse it into
we want to,
punchier bullets.
we want to make this into, I think if we agree on the bullets,
But that's my
the end,
question, he's
right?
saying, you are saying
I'll give
one
you 2
bullet of
sentences.
OPEB, right? And we were saying a second bullet on school. And a third bullet on staffing, are we down to just one major theme of OPEB? I don't know that,
I think there's a way to phrase a theme that encompasses kind of.
I mean, overall,
Right?
I think
overall,
that
when you get right down to it,
it's the
like,
future.
but
It's the
everyone's been-
theme.
yes.
We got to watch out for
But
what's
it's
coming in the
It's really
future.
past. It's a liability that's already incurred.
Yeah, but we're going to pay it
Versus
out in the
school
future.
could be
Yeah.
future. It's
Yeah,
two
no, you got a
different-
good point. Yeah.
That's,
When you do, maybe you should do a suggested, a couple sentences that expresses your concern, you know, and leads people to want to read the section on the school committee, school budget rather.
yeah.
how about this?
Mm.
I mean,
I will take a stab
Yeah.
without in the original, okay, of going in layman's terms on the OPEB. But I gotta get the number, whenever, the 107 number.
I emailed it to you.
You
I
did already?
emailed this whole report
No,
to
I mean,
everyone.
I can do
You'll
the
all
And then
have
you
it.
can revise it, and
Yeah.
you better, you'll revise. I don't mind anybody totally revising. If it gets you moving forward, I'm glad to draft, and you know going in that you're gonna have to revise it. Are we good with that?
Yeah, I'm fine, but I think we just got to figure out how many points we're trying to hit.
I have another suggestion as well, just in general, and this might be off point, but while I'm thinking of it, maybe next year, to avoid this kind of problem in the future, we should take the warrant report first meeting and go through it and say, and make our priorities from this. Because one of the things I realized when I was looking through this was that's when I picked up on that footnote about OPEB, and I'm like, oh, they were supposed to do that new actuarial. I wonder if they did it. Well, if we looked at this at the beginning of the year, that would have been on the list of questions we had to ask.
Right.
And, you know, it might be a good way to structure our finance committee year to say, okay, what did we have to say at the end of last year, and how are we going to make sure that any questions that were raised here get answered?
Okay,
Um,
got it. One thing that's off topic but related to that, as a new member, that I think would be really helpful, and I'm happy to do this or work with you, Bill, to do this, is to take a lot of the definitions and explanations and policies that are in the budget book that you get now and kind of create a summary, and I'm sure someone has done this before too, but that can be gone over when you have new members on the committee in one of those first meetings and start that way too. And then if you do it with everyone else, they can give their input and kind of say, hey, this is why this is really important to me and these are the things I like. And then we could move on to the previous year's warrant letter, and that way they can say, oh, now I totally get what you were saying last year because I just learned all this new information.
I already have a list of 12 items for next year, so no worries.
Okay.
Okay, so we have OPED and what others in the executive summary?
Well, as I suggest, I really think we ought to use, Bill's gonna give an overall, our structure looks good. And then, if people wanna have a tearaway sheet, I think at least each of our topics ought to be covered. Reserves are fully funded or mostly funded.
Yeah.
Personnel costs are under control, school budget's tight.
Are we
Capital.
mentioning things that are under control in the
No,
executive summary?
you can do anything you want. In fact, that point I was trying to make before is, if you want to put in the executive summary, a couple sentences for the school or more, that says, oh, by the way, Dr. Price has some great goals, but we recognize the concern that the funding may not be there to pay for those things in the timeframe that she wants. More news later. You get into the detail of the body of the report later on.
But I think to your point though, Thomas, if you want to cover in the bullet points, the capital program, he doesn't have a whole lot to say.
No.
His bullet point's gonna be,
If you think you have
Things are
something to
within
say that's
spec.
impactful,
You know, we're
help
working
sentences,
within
stick it in the
spec.
executive summary part, and we'll go over it next week. How's
Okay.
that?
I like that.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't really,
Otherwise, just work on your
Should
section.
we start another document for the executive summary just to?
Would you like that?
Can we edit it?
Yeah.
Yes,
you
we're
can-
gonna have,
So-
why can't I just
So,
do it,
I have a
I'm just gonna do it in the same document for sanity,
Yeah,
but
sure.
add it at the beginning.
I'm not
Okay.
sure if she's able to go through this or not, but I've decided that Dr. Goldman here has to figure out how we can get through.
Okay.
We kept that on the record.
Okay,
Liz,
so we'll go through there.
when you email everybody.
Who's
what email
ultimately
address would you use?
responsible for the
Our
executive
town
summary
Each
and editing
person
and
Each person
did you not get it?
is going to, so we will do the school, 2 sentences. If he wants to add something on SIP, he
but
can.
that's gonna be
It's okay.
okay. I just was thinking if someone had somewhat ownership of
What?
it.
I sent it to FinCom.
We'll.
Yeah, I'm okay with the,
We'll revise it.
I think that balances the
I like
two
what
needs.
Thomas said. Budget's fine.
Yeah.
Enough said.
Nobody goes rogue on us.
But I think I also listened to Liz and saying, this is our audit report, this is our report.
Well,
Yeah.
well,
I don't wanna
you
get rid of all the hard work either.
you just can't be a rubber stamp. If you just do this one little, tear-off sheet and nothing more,
We had that 4 years ago, didn't we?
that's right. That's exactly what we had. So we're not gonna be a rubber stamp. We're not the, what is it, an arm of the administration, or, some robot responding to stuff. This is, we actually look at this stuff. I think it's a great format.
Okay.
Let me teach you how to use your iPad before we leave. Karen.
Okay, so we've got kind of things to do.
I'll email you as soon as I've
Yeah.
changed the format and
Sure.
added the executive summary and so forth, okay?
Okay.
And then everybody the link, is that fair?
Yeah.
Is tomorrow by noon time okay with everyone?
Yeah, yeah,
Good.
Wanna turn around?
And
No,
then,
midnight
you
tonight.
could even have more time, Okay, so
Of
now that we know
course.
how we're gonna do that, I think we can leave in the process, just because again, that just explains how we did the math. I have a section here I could move somewhere else, where I just go through the 2 experiments from the year before, and I think I can find some sort of heading, but I think it's just important. Plus,
Where is that section?
One
Can you
thing-
tell me where you're talking? 'Cause I
yeah,
remember
after the
reading
OPEB
this.
paragraph, I talk about 2
Oh, the
initiatives.
2 initiatives, you want to?
So I'll just move that down and we'll find another place to stick it.
Okay.
Maybe operational changes or something I can.
One
edit.
question I had was kind of about town council, and if you could scroll a little,
Mhm.
kind of, if we can understand what kind of expense savings there were, or I don't
Yeah.
know if that's easy to just
Yeah.
suss out.
So here's what I'll explain what I did and the information that I got and
Okay.
and how I did it. So was going back and forth with Andrew last week.
Bill, I gotta run a little bit earlier.
Oh, sure.
Are we almost at the end?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you okay with the chart?
I can't talk much.
I'm
very bad.
Because I don't know how to get it into the document.
Oh, I can do that.
I couldn't.
Yeah.
So
believe
the
that.
revised one is
My
on my
throat
email?
is
Yeah, I
like,
sent it back.
Okay.
yeah,
Perfect.
I
call
prick it.
Thank you.
Eagle claw syndrome.
So,
Bye, Thomas.
Bye.
so the tricky part is it's not exactly apples to apples because she didn't get hired at the beginning of the fiscal year. So basically what he said, net, we would have saved around $12,000 had she been there. But that's not, but what he's trying to do is say, hey, legal expenses is something that's traditionally been spiky based on need. So based on what they projected, $12 million out of municipal budget, and then Dr. Price said what? And Dr. Price said we saved $700 so far.
Okay.
So we would save about $700.
It's an awfully hard thing to actually quantify, isn't it?
Yeah. So what I was trying to avoid was, because I thought overall, the point that Andrew made during the whole discussion and that Jen made was that we were getting more legal services
Yes.
and we were staying within the price. He wasn't saying this is a cost. He wasn't saying it was going to be more expensive, but he wasn't saying it was going to be cheaper. So if you use that
Cost
yardstick,
neutral, like she uses
Yeah.
the cost
The
neutral
only reason I
term.
said that is I know it was a pretty hot topic at
Right.
town meeting last
Yeah,
year. So if we
it
could,
was.
if there was,
Yeah,
if we had the
we could put
ability to
that
say, it was, instead of just saying it was successful, say we would have achieved we achieved these cost savings.
Mhm.
However, legal expenses fluctuate, and we believe, we're getting
Yeah,
more
yeah,
services,
yeah.
whatever.
yeah, so what I tried to say was, has helped town legal expenses to be lower than normal.
That's good.
It's not the only reason, but I could put in,
No, but don't keep going.
I could put in like, just a quick edit on how much.
Yeah, because we went through turmoil last year on this.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's,
We-
I don't know if
we
they
got
need
it
to know
done,
all of
but
it.
it wasn't
all
easy.
of that, just a couple.
Yeah, I could add a little bit, and then, because really what I was trying to get to is that the real difference between last year and this year is not that we're saving a little bit of money. The real difference is that there's someone going through as they establish a policy on such and such, or just reviewing, there's a whole bunch of work that we'd never do if the meter was running.
Right.
Like that's
Or
I think
someone
that-
without that expertise, without legal expertise and background would be
Right.
trying to evaluate that
Right.
to save as a cost savings measure.
right.
Understand?
So ultimately, we'll never really know what
No, because presumably she's gonna help us avoid certain pitfalls just by being here.
Right.
And those pitfalls we may have spent a lot of money on.
right,
But if
but
we
we'll
have
never
council
know.
in-house, we'll really never
Yeah.
know. But if you have council to bounce it off of,
Yeah.
you don't know how much you're
And we're
saving by
getting
simply doing
whatever
that.
3 times as many
This was always a
hours.
judgment call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a good judgment.
There it is.
Yep.
Okay.
But
Well,
we
how
can-
much are we paying in outside council versus last year?
Less. Yeah,
Well,
something less.
well, because we didn't have in-house council,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
by
and you have loaded with benefits and,
that's,
Yeah.
and I think that was the concern of those that
Yeah,
were against it.
yeah.
yeah.
So that's why I'm just
Well-
trying to, because that's gonna, some people are gonna see that and go, because they were
Right.
really against it,
Yeah.
that's why I asked.
Now I could throw some numbers in there.
Now you can edit it.
I
It
just
doesn't
didn't
even
want to.
have
I didn't want to
lot.
put them in just because they were so non-apples to apples. Where you're like, well,
Yeah.
you could start out and just saying, hey, it was way cheaper, and then if someone says, well, she wasn't there as long, it was
Yeah.
How much
Yeah.
are we spending again?
about a.
Outside, I meant outside council year
Yeah,
over
and
year.
Yeah.
I think it's really hard to quantify some of that too. I agree with you, Tim. I think it was a judgment call, and I think it's,
Yeah.
I don't know.
You can,
You can't quantify a lot of it.
right, and then if you can quantify it, then something was drastically wrong with your judgment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, no, I think I think we can do that. We'll leave process.
Is that, and then, no, right there, down a little, next page.
Pencil and you can edit.
Was that 4% or 3.5%?
Yeah, that should be 4%.
You know it's my
Oh, we won't. I'm sorry, I
Okay.
know this lawyer.
You
He used to run
threw,
all
you
these,
threw
but
me
you
for a
can't.
loop. I was like,
That's why I
"What's
suggest.
the
No.
response?"
You know what? I did the
No, your response before you can say.
the whole thing, and then I realized it was 4, not 3. So I know. So I've kept this in. This was what we did last year, just ups and downs with explanations.
All right.
I don't know if it's worth it or not.
You're on.
Part of that's gonna be part of the executive, could be part of the executive summary.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should just double check that.
The second part, right, is after
Sure.
everyone
Sure.
kind of
Hold on.
gets everything
Yeah.
final in their eyes,
There.
you pare
Just a
everything
note
down
back on it.
Right.
Just saw it.
and take out redundancies.
Okay.
Okay, can I, Karen just asked a really good question, and the point was, she's doing her part of the reports, sorry. As she's doing her part of the report and she sees something else in a different section she'd like to edit, with Google, you can't track changes and see, on her iPad, you can't.
I
So,
thought you could. No.
Well, you
that's if
can't in
open it
general.
up in Google Docs fully, and she's on
Yeah.
iPad.
Just highlight it.
You can't. You can't.
Are we
It's different technique.
editing each other's sections?
Change the font and then add it, so we,
I don't
Hmm.
think so, because we're not finalized, right? And everyone now is doing their
by
next
next week we are.
we can.
So why don't we
italics.
say? Why don't we say this? Why don't we say that
Oh,
next
Right.
week we'll.
you can work around it.
So if she's not in Google, what's she? In?
She can
Yes,
just do it in
but you-
italics, Jen, and then that would show as edit or additions.
Yeah, but the point is, you want her to be able to delete words that somebody else
No,
wrote
not
in their
delete.
section. So if you wanna
Yeah.
change something for
Yeah.
now, maybe put a parentheses,
Yeah.
your words
comments.
inside, and your
Yeah.
initials, and then close parentheses. And then next week we'll go
And I
through
think
it.
don't edit like wording and I would edit substance, right? Not like if you see a missing, if you think a sentence should be reworded or is
Like an
awkward.
apostrophe S as opposed to.
Yeah, that's for the next edit. I think it's
Right.
more substance.
And
Next
will
Yeah,
edit
and
is
one
really
person
that
should
on
be
the
going through
screen?
for that, not all of us.
Together?
Well,
Would
no,
that
what
be a group edit?
And one
What I
person
think we should.
I think
What I think we should do. And we've done that before, so I don't. I don't think we tested the last time we did
Put your-
it.
Yeah.
Put your views in parentheses, and I think when we do the final edit, then we can.
Okay, but last year the final edit was done a lot over email, let's be honest. It was not done.
Well, listen, you have to. I mean, at a certain
That's what I'm
point,
saying.
at a certain
Somebody
point, at
takes
the end of the day,
ownership.
somebody has to
Of the
clean it
whole-
up
yeah.
at the end because
Yep.
it's just
Well,
you can't go
that's what I'm
through.
saying, so we don't wait
sentence by
till
sentence.
next meeting to do the final edits, then we're,
Have you set a
That's why
timeline
Susan shouldn't have resigned.
to get the next drafts done?
So I think we get the next drafts done by. I mean, we have till Tuesday. I think we stick with get everything done by Sunday.
okay.
Yeah.
And we'll meet on Tuesday, right?
I'm gonna regret this, but if everyone can get their stuff done by Friday, I'll edit the document over the weekend.
You'll do what, sorry?
I'll edit the document over the weekend,
For just continuity and
yeah.
that kind of stuff.
That doesn't work. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
I'm thinking the same thing, too, because we may have 2 meetings next week.
Yeah,
Why do you say that?
we have
Because of
2 on the
this?
calendar,
Do we? What's the,
11th and 13th.
okay,
So.
yeah, it's likely we will. It's just, this is an important part.
Then do you wanna give us more time to do substance and people can do edits next week then, and we have 2 meetings, or what, I mean, I was just, what's
I
your
mean,
preference?
there's 3.
Preface is one meeting next week.
There's 3. Well, I don't think there's 3 things we're gonna do next week. We're gonna do the warrant. We could hear from John Simmons, who I've been trying to track down from community preservation. I gave him 2 options. If he says I want to come on Thursday, then we'll see him on Thursday. Anyway, because we had it scheduled, so it was already in the calendar. We already had a room, and we got to finish the letter. Okay. And we have to get the letter finished up. So I think that would be a lot for one meeting.
Friday?
Yeah,
So let's
Yeah.
That
shoot
makes
for
me
Friday.
extremely nervous.
Yeah.
I
Let's-
agree.
Is what Friday?
Sasha
Yep.
edit, and we can see the edits by Monday, so that we have a chance to read it ourselves. Okay.
Can you, and if I'm gonna, depends on how my week goes. Well, do you want me to give everyone Friday night and so by, so you, I
You
know
start
people
editing
are-
it Saturday
So by
morning.
Saturday morning at
Like 6
when my
a.m.
kid wakes up at 5,
Yep.
I'll be sitting on my laptop.
All right.
That actually happened this week again. I'm gonna test
She's
it.
Do you actually work for a living?
totally amazing.
Like, put this movie on. Here's
Yes,
your
just watch
cereal.
it.
I'm on the
Are
phone
you
from
ready?
work. Okay, mom.
Okay. All right, then that's fine. I do think we should take a minute on the collective bargaining agreements. And here's what I would,
I deleted one column completely just,
yeah. Yeah, so I was gonna say, because the collective bargaining agreements are tough because the only way to really get at the increases is to go through each one.
I did.
Because, and come up with, this is what the percentage increases are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, okay.
I think there's some value to doing that. I think it makes, you can see how nervous Andrew was. But,
Well, the thing is, I think,
Karen,
we might have really bitten a piece off, but I really think that between the two of us, we got the nugget of it.
right.
And if we could pull that together in one chart form,
What
I
was the
did
final
in
comment
in
to
the-
add?
in one chart, I did bring everything together.
yes, yes.
Did you go through
you
the
did.
chart?
I did, but the hard part is that the amount of money that the salaries go up year over year is not the same because it's not the same. So basically, in year one, you might have 5 oranges and 3 apples. You may have 5 people who are ready to retire and 3 people who are new. And then in year 2, you have 2 apples and 5 oranges, just on the composition. So the amount of money that you spend on funding a particular bargaining unit's contract is not a function of what their pay increase was individually.
It's a function of
So
what they,
where
their
you
makeup.
where you get that number from is to go in and say, okay, on this step goes up 2.5%.
Exactly. That's
That
exactly
step
right.
goes up 2.5%. So I think if we had a chart that said that, that's an easy story.
That's what we're gonna do.
Okay.
Because
That
the
chart
other-
I think is fine. But
Yeah.
the other way, I think it could look like, that one I think could be really hard because if you had 5 people retire the year before and then all of a sudden your personnel costs are down,
Yeah.
you get the bargaining and being like, oh look,
The thing is just like moving
Yeah.
all over the place.
Yeah.
So, but I agree. I think we're gonna have to modify it that way.
So I think if it in that perspective, in that way, it would work to say that the bargaining units are in.
Hey,
Karen,
Karen,
get all that data.
are there
Who's-
separate
who's
union
retired, how
contracts
many
for,
are new and stuff?
there's 2
And-
lieutenants that have their own union contract. Is there
Do you have
separate,
that
like
data?
Superintendent Price or
They
town
have
Yeah.
manager?
Yes.
They have their own.
They
But
have-
are they
Yeah.
part not under this? Or are they separate?
They're
contracts?
separate.
So they're not under
They have
collective
their own
bargaining?
Right.
Okay.
Just superintendent, town manager.
Superintendent, town
Town
manager,
manager.
and I think there's a couple other cats and dogs.
Really? I thought it was maybe 2, 3.
The fire chief,
The fire chief
But
is
that's a
separate.
union.
the chief, no, the chief is out.
Is out
Is
of
out.
the union, so the firefighters are under the union, but not the
Yeah,
chief.
the chiefs are.
I would imagine you would say probably the police,
Chief is.
chief of police as well.
No, I think he is, right? Or is it just the?
No, he's not in a
He's
union.
not?
No, I remember last year because he didn't want to sign the contract they gave to him, and it was a big back and forth about the contract, and they kind of picked their horse before they decided that the contract was going to be an important sticking point, and then they had to.
I remember now that you're saying it.
So again, summarize the game plan, wrap it up by Friday.
Yeah.
Sasha has it done, hopefully, so we can look it over Monday. Tuesday, we can come in with our guns blazing or saying,
Yeah.
More tweaks.
Yeah, I'm sure there
And-
will be more. I'm just gonna try to make it so we have some, a draft to work off of, so it's not
Right.
just all over the place.
and Bill, I like to do is make sure that as part of this process that I shoot you a 1 or 2 sentence thing for executive summary.
Right. Yeah.
That way.
And then I think the last thing we can do, and Tim and I, Tim, maybe you and I can do this. I think the very last thing we should do, and I don't think we need to do this in the meeting, but we should go through and pull out every number, the 2 of us, and just sort of sanity check every number, just to make sure that we have the,
Facts.
that we don't make any mistakes in that.
Oopahs.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
So in terms of the other sections, do you want each of us to shoot you sort of those bullet points for the executive summaries, or?
yeah, everyone's responsible to shoot
Why can't you just stick them right into Google?
whatever you
Yeah,
want.
that's what I
Yeah.
mean, right
Put
into
them
the
in.
document at the
just
beginning,
if you-
or,
if you
So
put
you'll
that
set it
on
up, and every.
I'm gonna set it up, and then
We'll
you just
put
kinda
them in.
dump in your,
Right.
but, OPEB, is that gonna be handled as part of the reserves, or are you gonna do that separately? And can we, if we do OPEB, maybe the way to present that is, here's the OPEB nut, but in terms of other reserves, we're in good,
Yeah.
maybe
No, I
maybe
think-
that's
OPEB
the
is part of
story
the
there,
reserves,
Yeah.
you know?
So I think we,
That would be a good segue.
Yeah.
I mean, here's my thought on the action side. Like, I kind of wanted this to be like a clarion call to, we need to set up a group to start looking at this. Like other towns have done this with varying degrees of success. You know, Andover failed at it, even though they tried hard and they took 2 years. They came up with a proposal that was not met and got reversed at town meeting or something.
They made the effort.
But they made an effort. And then I looked at Danvers. I don't think of Danvers as like an exceptionally wealthy town, but they have over 4 million in there. They have a school reserve fund, $4 million, $4.7 million, and then they have
How much is in their OPEB?
their OPEB is 4 million. But I don't think Danvers has that. I could look actually. We could find out.
How fast they did their finance.
Business revenue.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is.
You know, but we're never gonna get the North Shore Mall. I mean, that's, you know what I mean? Location.
Location.
We're never gonna
Yeah.
get. We're never gonna get the North Shore Mall.
Hold on a second though. What you're saying is you're gonna do this chart, as painful as it's been. But
Yeah, that's part of the
Are
audit.
you gonna put any more words in here about OPED? I think.
So I think we have a
Scumho
section.
should help her with that.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I think we
can
need to work on
coordinate.
that
So
whole
we can
OPEB
have
thing. Yeah.
the OPEB is the problem. The reserves are one subset of the solution.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only reason I brought up that 107,000 was it was a footnote in my section, and that's why it came to my attention. So,
Yeah.
you know, we'll
Okay.
work
See,
together
OPED
on it.
doesn't have its separate section. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
No,
You're
no,
putting
it's part of the
summary,
reserves,
but
right.
It's part of the reserves.
Right.
Okay.
That's
so we
why I
can do
asked the
that,
question.
And then we can put in the
Why don't I
detail in the chart.
copy your whole section into the reserve area, this part here, and then we'll pull back
Okay.
1 or 2
And
sentences.
who was
Into the
writing that
reserve?
first?
You mean into the executive
writing
summary
the
reserve?
executive summary part? That first part, the thematic part.
I'll write the thematic part and I'll do the OPEB section. But other than that, I'm done.
And then everyone puts their
All right.
notes in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
I'll
we'll-
still do my section the way I normally do. We can hack it and cut it if we have to. But
Do we need more graphs and more charts and more
I just feel
color?
we did. We went with charts on ours.
Or no?
you know, again, we have to think about our audience. I think if it's truly an audit report,
Yeah.
do we need that? Who are we writing this report for? The executive summary is, you know, think about your
Yeah,
audience.
I think it's. I'm not opposed to it. I mean, I thought the
I think
SIP
the
chart
charts
was
in the-
pretty good.
I think in the high content area, there should be some more visuals.
Mm-hmm.
But in the executive summary, no.
I mean, only if
Keep
it's
it
short,
short,
like
like
you
1
don't.
to 2 pages.
I mean, you don't
Yeah.
make a visual just to have a visual, but if there's something that can be expressed really clearly in a
That covers
chart.
it.
or a
absolutely.
I think that's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't think of one.
just, you know, don't do it just.
Okay.
Well, I mean, like you said, the graph with, you know, schools.
You know what, I know
What, the chart? The pie chart?
Yeah, I saw that actually.
That doesn't, yeah, but that's
Okay.
the idea of the future. It does give you how much money is going to each area of the town.
Right. Okay. All right. So, anything else that's kind of unclear on next steps? All right. Do we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
I heard you, Angela.